Twisters is an action thriller about a group of storm chasers doing research in Tornado Alley. So this is a standalone sequel to the 1996 movie Twister. We follow Kate, played by Daisy Edgar-Jones. She's a former storm chaser now working on the back end of meteorology after a traumatic tornado experience she had years prior. She's visited by her old friend Javi, played by Anthony Ramos. He comes to her with a new system for analyzing tornadoes with hopes that she'll join him and lead his storm chasing career down in Tornado Alley. There they encounter a group of YouTube storm chasers led by the charismatic Tyler Owens, played by Glenn Powell. Kate and her crew have to navigate these thrill seekers while attempting to capture models that could greatly benefit tornado research. So this is a somewhat predictable, high-energy Hollywood thriller, but at its core, it's a story about redemption. It's about a girl who's haunted by her past shortcomings and wants to make things right. She sees the opportunity Javi has given her as a beacon of hope. It's a chance for her to contribute to a meaningful change so that other people don't have to endure what she went through. This movie's main source of action stimulation is, of course, the energy and chaos created by tornadoes. There are a couple twisters they observe that aren't catastrophic, showing us that storm chasing isn't necessarily about chaos and destruction. But then there's the twisters that are catastrophic, and that's when the movie gets to be really intense. The danger that these characters face is sometimes pretty thrilling. And this film doesn't just take prisoners. When the winds are blowing and debris is flying around, you'll sometimes see people bite the dust. The tornado CGI is pretty solid here. I can personally tolerate mildly subpar CGI, assuming it's not laughably bad, so even if it was a little bit lacking, I probably wouldn't have batted an eye. But thankfully, it was actually great. For a movie that's literally called Twisters, the tornadoes are really the one thing that you can't get wrong. That was one of the more exciting things about getting an almost 20 years later sequel, is that with the evolution of technology, we could get a more dazzling version to see in theaters. I should clarify that you don't actually need to see the original Twister movie before seeing this one. This movie does tip the hat to it and has some parallels, but you could totally just watch this and not be lost. Following the trend of that movie, this one is not meant to be a highbrow film. It's definitely a popcorn movie, but there were still some things that bothered me. This movie seems to have wanted there to be some sort of initial rivalry between Kate and Javi's crew and Tyler's crew. At least that's what it felt like, which I just don't really understand. This was definitely just to give the movie some rivalrous tension, but it just didn't make sense when they're not actually competing for anything. It's not like tornado research is scarce. In theory, they can observe the tornadoes cooperatively. I have read that storm chasers like to be competitive about who picks the right storms to chase, but I wouldn't say that explicitly applied to the way that they were being competitive in this movie. So the second half of this movie was definitely much better than the first half. It was right about around the halfway point that I started to think, okay, things are really getting intense now. Honestly, it was mostly just the first act that I had problems with. The prologue was just a little bit too cute. It takes place years prior to the main events of this film, so it starts off with younger Kate. She has this traumatic experience that starts off really endearing. Normally that's to create contrast so that the tragic events feel even heavier and so that you see the innocence before it's lost. But it could have been dialed back a couple notches. It just felt too cute and too safe. So much so that you just go, okay, so we all know exactly how bad this is gonna go. Because the only other thought one could have at that point is, wow, this action thriller is surprisingly upbeat and endearing. I'm sure nothing bad will happen. So when the time jumps to Kate being recruited, Javi is pretty adamant that he desperately needs her. He's saying things like, I can't do this without you. Wait, why? She was practically a kid when she last chased a storm, and you have an entire team of experts at your disposal. What do you need her for? It's just lazy setup. It's hard not to ask these questions because, given the tone, the movie generally wants to be taken seriously. It does have some comic relief in it, but it is by no means a comedy film first. The sillier aspects of the movie are definitely subtle, which is very much appreciated. Serious movies generally need to stay serious. Just to reiterate a point I made in my recent review for The Bike Riders, modern cinema likes to use comedy as a crutch, even when it doesn't necessarily suit the tone of the story. This movie has its humor evenly and very subtly sprinkled throughout it so that it's not sticking out like a sore thumb. It thankfully still feels like a serious movie. As far as characters go, Tyler and his crew shined the brightest, with Tyler being the most entertaining character. Thanks to another wonderful performance from Glenn Powell, he's lively, he's charming, he's basically the star of the show, but in the form of a supporting character. This is not to say that he's really that remarkable. The truth is that we have to look at him for entertainment because our main character, Kate, is just pretty two-dimensional. The same could be said about Tyler, but Tyler was more entertaining and wasn't meant to be the main character. Kate just doesn't have much personality or depth to her at all. There is that whole past trauma aspect of her character, but it was honestly pretty underutilized. She has a couple moments where she reflects on this, literally a couple, considering that she's roped into this gig through her personal attachment. There was definitely some more room for this to have an enduring impact on her, and it could have made her a much more compelling character. There was also plenty of potential to unpack more from the dynamics that she had with some characters like Javi and her mom. They were all but left on the floor. So I think the best way to describe this movie is that it's a high energy movie that just cuts a few too many corners. It definitely did not need to be a smart movie, but it could have had a more interesting protagonist, and it could have done a better job fleshing out more than the bare minimum. Overall, it's an occasionally exciting movie, despite being kind of generic. I'll give you this rare in-between rating of it's fine and it's good because I'm actually about to tweak my rating system to be a little bit less garbage. If you feel like going to the theater to see an easily digestible movie with your friends, a popcorn bucket, and a beer, this one could be a good one for that. But if you're in the mood to watch a movie that makes you think any amount more than not at all, then this is probably not the movie for you. Thank you for watching this review. If it brought you any value at all, please give it a like. It really does help the channel grow. I'll see you next week with my reviews of Dee Dee and Deadpool and Wolverine.